Classes in session.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Unlearn 16 classes in session. Guys, today I have a fight ready to go. I think we have a throwdown fight. No, we don't. We actually discuss incredibly well. You guys maybe know him as Viva Frei from Twitter. He has a pretty significant presence there. He has a significant podcast that, where does that stream? All over, like
I
Rumble,
Rumble,
Steamboat.
YouTube, locals, and then I snip and clip and put it to Twitter.
It's all over the place, really. It's genuinely all over the place. But what we found, I think David and I have found this nice little, I don't know, this nice place of we disagree maybe on a lot more than most, but I like it. And I think we do it honestly and we do it intelligently. And I think hopefully that's the kind of dialogue people want to hear.
I was talking about it with my wife, where we were saying, like, we can disagree, and I don't get the impression that you're, because there are bad faith actors out there. I'll say on both sides,
Of course.
genuine bad faith actors, or who are malicious in intent, deliberately trying to mislead, trolls. And then there are others who are legitimate and sincere in their beliefs, which I and my wife is a good judge of character as well. Have no doubt you are. And I think it's when you have these people talk that you can. I don't think we disagree on all that much. There's some fundamental stuff that we do disagree on, but then you find out how much you do agree on. But that's a dangerous thing, Joe, because what ends up happening is the base that thinks we have to, fight tooth and nail, say, how can you agree on these things? You're joining the enemy, you're controlled opposition, whatever. But we're going to be in for another one tonight.
Yeah.
I forget what the latest Twitter exchange we had is, but I'm sure I'll remember, and we're going to.
I can't remember it right now. What I find interesting, and what I find, I found interesting about our conversation. I mean, we talked for 3 hours, guys. If you haven't heard our conversation, for the love of God, I'm going to put all of his links in the bio so you guys can click on them and go find it. But we talked for 3 hours. 3 hours,
and could have gone another hour easily.
And what I was anticipating, I'm not going to lie, was definitely, because I'm like, well, now my face, my username has sort of been put, on Rumble, has been put on these other platforms that I don't necessarily frequent, and has been put with your considerable body that follows you. And I'm like, I'm bracing myself for the onslaught. And you know what? I got none of it.
Joe, I'm telling you this. The fear is the fear. The reality, generally speaking, is much different. Now, for people who are your subs, your fans in your realm of the interwebs, probably think that I'm some sort of wild radical extremist. I mean, I was described as like alt-right on Wikipedia until they corrected that. I've been sort of demonized by W5CTV. And I think a lot of people think, especially if they only know me from Twitter, they must think I'm a wild radical. Can I swear? Asshole. Oh, okay. No.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
A-hole, bunghole. And then you realize you have a discussion with somebody. I yesterday or the day before, I think it was yesterday, had on my channel Kareem Assad, who is an attorney out of Toronto. She does a lot of reporting. She's, I guess you say, left wing, like she doesn't like the conservatives, I think, but is fair in her assessment.
Right.
And then some people from her crowd saw our interview. She popped on for 15 minutes, and then I see on Twitter, Viva, I thought Viva was a total a-hole from his Twitter feed, but he's at, and I was like, well, but this is the problem, is we feel the need to reduce people to like one-dimensional aspects to deal with a complex individual, to either write them off, demonize them, or lionize them. And things are much more complex than that in real life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think that's the fundamental key of everything, is that everything is very complex. Everything is a 3-hour discussion. Everything is, contingent upon all these multiple factors that when you boil it down to just a catchphrase, sure, you get a lot of people behind you screaming bloody murder, but you don't get to anything important. All you get to is division, anger, hatred. For what? That does zero people any good, no matter what side of that fence you're on, right? I think today we're going to talk about something that obviously is close to my heart, and we kind of got at it a little bit on your channel, which is, and it's funny because I just did a TikTok today kind of talking about something that was going on in Florida, is talking about how we create a healthy educational system. I'll sort of frame it this way, and you can sort of throw in caveats if you want. A healthy education system with teachers, with parents, with administrators, like people who are external to that, the bureaucracy that, let's say, creates the curriculum and creates the expectations and how you move through public education, and how you create a balance of all that. Is that
I say
where we're at?
the way I synthesize it is, where is the line between a teacher and a parent? And I think a lot of the conflict that we're
Right,
witnessing right now is because of the blurring of that line, or in some senses, destruction of that line, where teachers say, we have the communist phrase, like it's our kids, they're children of the children of the community and not of the parents. Whereas others say, damn no, teachers are going to have a very delineated role in my child's development and the rest is left up to me. And the
right.
question is, where is that line?
Where's that line? And obviously, some of this got started clearly from what books go into each classroom. That's a big thing. Book uh, taking books out of the classroom. What's allowed to be in curriculum? What's not allowed to be in curriculum? At what age is it allowed to be in curriculum? And then we are obviously also talking about pronouns and acceptable time periods in which you're allowed to speak to that. Um, so where's the line for you?
It,
Can I start with this? I think the line used to be blurred a long time ago. Teachers used to be able to hit kids.
it is, well, it's actually a decent point, in that the line
I
has
had a
always.
grade 3 teacher that would throw things at me when I was in the back row. I got real fast.
Oh no, my father growing up used to say how he got the ruler on the knuckles. I mean,
Uh-huh.
it was. I don't know what the line is, where the line has been drawn, and whether or not there has always been something of an overlap in this Venn diagram. Um, everybody always says, like, the best teachers are the ones that are confidants that you can go to when you can't go to your parents and you have your family ties type moments. I think the issue is where it becomes a problematic violation is where it crosses over the lines of things that were hitherto sacrosanct. The funny thing is, the line between physical abuse and sexual abuse has always been a special line in America. Violence has always been tolerated, but sexuality has not. And so the idea that a teacher might spank a student or smack a student is less offensive of a violation, at least I presume back in the day, than sexualizing a kid. Religion and sex, I think, have been things that everyone says keep
But
away.
there's clear laws that say there's no relationship between you go to prison, you sleep with a student, you go to jail. That's crystal clear. Because I think what you're going to get at is something very different, and that's where we're going to disagree. But it's interesting you called it a Venn diagram, and I've been a teacher for 20 years, and it's absolutely a Venn. As much as I am not a parent, there is no way you can get around being a parental figure. But I will say this, if we look at child development, what you have to understand is kids care much more. So kids care about their parents, and then they come to elementary school and they do care about their teachers. They care about their teachers to about grade 5. And then we know they stop psychologically, right? They start to care about their friends. I don't matter anymore in the big picture. A little bit, I try to impart knowledge, teach them history, but they really turn to their friends and they become much more dominant and much more important. And that's who they listen to and that's who they confide in, which is the scary part because you have a bunch of 14, 15-year-olds walking around confiding in each other about things that are terrifying and very adult and very dangerous. And they're not telling their parents and they're not telling their teachers because a lot of the times they won't. They know, and I make it very clear because I don't the thing about being a teacher, the scary thing about being a teacher is how do I create a safe space where if a kid's hurt, if a kid's hurting, 100% I need them to come to me. Absolutely. And I don't think there's anybody out there who would say that if a kid is getting harmed and hurt or abused in their home, that they shouldn't have places they can go to and say, this is what's happening. My job at that point though is to pick up the phone, right? That's my job, my responsibility, my legal responsibility to pick up the phone and involve child, whatever the version of child protective services is,
in
right?
in the event of physical abuse, or demonstrable psychological abuse.
Yes.
But back it all the way up to the beginning, and this is where I think the problem is, uh, where you said I'm not a parent, but I'm a parent type figure or a parental figure. And
Sure.
I see there is a very material distinction between an authority figure and a parental figure. And
What is
that
it?
now that I have to think about it in real time, the
It's
difference
hard,
would, well,
isn't
it
it?
is an authority figure would be someone who is in a position of authority that is fundamentally not a parent. And then a parental figure would be one in which you are substituting someone who is not a parent for the relationship that ought to be only between the child and the parent. And so, I mean, what types of things would this materialize as? I don't know. I'll have to come back to that bookmark in a second. But I do
Yeah.
think this is where the problem arises, is that you have a lot of teachers, and not all, and no pointing fingers, who confound the two and say, I undoubtedly authority figures for children. That's what a teacher's supposed to be. That's what a principal's supposed to be, a coach, all these other things. Someone from whom a kid learns, comes to for discipline and maybe life lessons, which is fundamentally different than a parental figure, where we always typically tend to regard people who get into relationships with others where they use them as a parental figure as dysfunctional relationships, where they're trying to accommodate for something that is missing from their lives through this relationship. And so they view their partner as a parental figure, as opposed to a partner. So,
Question.
yes,
As a parental figure, how would you because we're trying to define terms now by excluding other terms. It is an authority figure that is not a parent. Okay, so what is a parental figure? What would that be to you?
a parental,
Okay,
well,
outside of the people that give birth to. Okay, because it like try to give it a bit more
no,
span.
no, for sure. I mean, because I am not one to adhere to the belief that a non-biological adoptive parent is any less of a parental figure than someone who's given birth.
Mhm.
There's a different connection that, unfortunately, adoptive parents can probably never have, but that doesn't undermine the relationship. What is it? I don't know. I try to think of the things that are only for a parent and a child to discuss.
What are
Only
they?
for, well, typically I go to the things that you're not supposed to discuss at parties, religion and politics. So I think it is
Well,
it
then,
is.
so you would be against. Hold on, because that's important. You would be against Texas mandating the 10 Commandments put on a wall in every school.
Okay, so I'm nuanced on this as well, because I do appreciate the Judeo-Christian aspects of a society, that this Western society is built on certain Judeo-Christian values. In a public school, the Ten Commandments,
Well, that's
like,
what he's talking about. Every public school in Texas put up the 10 Commandments in every single room.
you know what? But this might be my own what is it called? Motivated reasoning to work my way around it. I think you can listen to a lot of the stuff from the Bible without having a religious aspect to it. And so the Ten Commandments, I think, are good rules of life. And I don't
Are they?
necessarily
The first three of the 10 Commandments,
don't
hold on, the
kill,
first three of the
don't.
10, wait, the first three
Let me
are
go
all
get it.
about belief in God.
Oh, I tell you this, I have no problem with that. I got to go look at the Ten Commandments now. I ordinarily I'd pull up the
The
screen
first
and see
three
this.
about God, don't blasphemy. Like the first three are just about belief in God, be afraid of him, be reverent of him. That's kind of the first three. Because I looked them up after they were going to put them on, because everybody knows the other ones,
Yeah,
right?
don't kill, don't cheat, don't steal. But
Sure.
I am
Do
the
you
Lord.
think we need a religious doctrine to teach that in class?
In a public school in a secular society, I would have no problem with it not being required. In a Judeo-Christian Western society, do I have a problem in public schools with reference to God? I can tell you I don't. Now, the only question is going to be why I do not, because I think it's cultural and not fundamentally religious. And so it's not like someone who's trying to convert a child to Christianity by virtue of having the Ten Commandments. It's a cultural, uh, philosophical gesture more than a religious one.
What's the difference?
Well, I mean, one I think is to pay homage to the founding principles of the nation. One nation under God. I have no problem with it. I don't consider myself to be a religious person.
Interesting.
It is
I have
more of
a
a.
huge problem with it.
Uh,
Massive problem with it. I feel like it has no space. It has no space in the public system. Should have no space in our government. We are a secular nation. Our founding principles, there are a lot of things that we are founded upon that we have let go of because we know the damage and the destruction and all of the things associated with that. If we are going to have freedom of religion, you cannot have freedom of without freedom from. And freedom from religion means I don't walk into my classroom every day as a student, as an impressionable student, and think whether I'm Christian and Jewish or Muslim or atheist or Baha'i, I don't care what you are, walk into that classroom and see a big framed poster of the things that I'm supposed to believe in because that's what this country used to be based on,
Well, I mean, let me
then we
ask
might
you,
as well call ourselves what we are,
which
which is
is
still a little bit theocratic, a little bit still based in those religious underpinnings that we have been saying forever that we are shedding. They shouldn't be able to form law. They shouldn't be able to form curriculum. They shouldn't be able to inform people's lives and people's morality that are
I
long.
well, but I mean that's I would say that's sort of factually historically incorrect. Where even the Charter of Rights of Canada is based on the supremacy of God. I mean, and it's not in a one religion type sense where it's an attempt to convert, but it is. I mean, and these are how the values of Western society were founded. So when you say one nation under God and you have the Ten Commandments, it's not saying go get baptized and be a born again Christian or be Jewish or be Muslim. It's saying these were the founding principles of a nation that created democracy, free speech, the very Charter of Rights that we purportedly believe in. And so, do I think that that's a religious violation or religious imposition on me? Well, I will say no, because on the one hand, um, you choose to live in a country that reflects your values, and not vice versa. Choose to shape your country around your own values. And if I decide to live in a country that has cultural norms and values that were born out of this history, it would take a degree of audacity for me to say, well, now you have to go scrub your history because I now find it offensive.
Oh, there's a big part. Okay, but there's not two options, right? It's not scrub your history and negate everything we've ever learned. No, I'm not doing that. I'm not banning a single book up in here. I also don't think it is suck it up and swallow it because it's only ever provided such great, impressive, amazing opportunities. I mean, I think the indigenous population of Canada would have a lovely thing to say about that. And I think the more that we grow and the more that we expand and the more that we recognize what this world is, and I try to be very respectful for people's religious beliefs. So when people are listening to it, they're going to be like, "Oh, she hates." No, I want everybody to have a personal faith that they believe in, that gives them comfort, that gives them any connection to whatever they need a connection to. However, we as a society have been progressing away from that for a reason. And I think the reason is crystal clear. Morality and religion don't go hand in hand. Because if we start going back to the morality of some religions and what they use religions in order to justify and in order to demand and in order to control and manipulate and indoctrinate, we're in some very muddy territory,
Yeah, but
right?
I, I don't. I'm not convinced that the Ten Commandments is a religious.
First three ones. I'm going to look them up.
No,
I'm
no,
going to look them up
please.
for you.
And by the way, look them up. Actually, I looked them up because I think it is important because it will highlight, the importance of having a godlike figure. And as the Bible says, someone taught me this during one of my streams that there's sort of an analogy between God and parents, in that for a certain period of time in a kid's life, their parents are basically their gods and need to provide that
That's
guidance and that instruction.
awful. I disagree.
Oh, no, but,
That's
it's not a question.
awful.
It's the truth, for good or for bad. So they're either good parents and behave because they occupy a godlike figure in a child's life. I'm not saying that this was not
Oh,
a
I see what
statement
you're
of how it
saying.
should be. It's just a statement
It's
of the
not
way it is.
prescriptive. All right, here's the first one says, "I am the Lord. Thou shalt not have any other gods." Number two, which basically is negating. By the way, you're negating 11 other religions. Number two, thou shalt not take the Lord's name in vain. We break that one all the time. I think it's funny because I want to know a Christian that's followed these. You show me that person, and I'd like to do a podcast because it
Joe,
seems
the perfection is not the goal; it's the pursuit of and the awareness and the attempt to.
perfection is not the goal. That's what everybody says when they're trying to figure out ways to skirt the ones that are inconvenient. And
No,
don't keep
I,
them
but
today. Bull crap. Wait. Number
yeah,
three, remember the Sabbath.
yeah. Well,
Remember
now,
the Sabbath. You
now,
gone
now.
shopping this Sunday lately?
Well, no, but the funny thing is the Sabbath. Well, now the question is, it'll be slightly less tenable to say that these are not religious based in a public school
There we go.
in Texas. Um,
And that's the point. And Texas is following this up with, let's be honest, very religious based laws. Very recently, and I don't know a lot about this, I'm glad that you're here. How did we get off teaching all of a sudden? But nonetheless, I knew that was going to happen. Very recently, I read that they were trying to pass a law in Texas, or the next major push is to get rid of no fault divorce. Have you read anything about
No, I
that
haven't.
recently?
To get rid of no fault divorce.
So is to get rid of the idea that, because I guess in all 50 states, from what I understand, again, we're in the law of legal tenets, that in order, if you want to get a divorce, anybody can get a divorce, and you do not need to prove abuse, you do not need to prove adultery. You can just be like, dude, I don't like you anymore, I'm out. And anybody can do that. From what I understand, Texas and the GOP in Texas is now trying to push for, and now I'm hearing Steven Crowder in my ear, because he made it very clear when he got a divorce, when he's in the middle of it, right? My wife chose to leave me, and I happen to live in a state where she doesn't need to prove there's a good reason to leave me. So now I can't do anything about it, and she can just walk off and yada, yada, yada.
Well,
So,
oh, but by
yeah,
the way, Joe, real time Google fact checking is
yeah,
the Texas bill is dead after failing to get a vote after it. Let's see, it sailed through the Texas
right.
Senate on a party line vote last month, received the initial
Okay.
approval among dozens of bills that didn't get. All right. Um,
Where did it get approved then? Where did it get killed?
it didn't. It seems
Not
that
in
it did
Abbott.
not. It was among the dozens of bills that didn't get a House floor vote before the midnight deadline. So I
Oh,
guess they had a new
okay.
session coming up.
There we
But it's interesting. Look, when it comes to that type of question,
go. Hmm.
I've come to the point in my life where now I do believe that people need some sort of fundamental guidance in terms of principles, and if they don't get it from religion, and they don't get it from somewhere else good, they're going to get it from somewhere else bad. Which is where I think a lot of the problems we're seeing today come from, is that people have abandoned what they think is an antiquated need for some sort of spiritual guidance, but they don't realize that they still need it somewhere, and if they don't get it, it's going to cause all sorts of psychological problems.
You think people need spiritual guidance to say that murder is wrong?
No, 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 no. That's an oversimplification. I think people need some form of spiritual guidance in order, just as a human condition, that not believing in anything greater than oneself, whether or not you can get this through things other than organized religion, which is where my struggle comes, because I don't really
Mhm.
believe in organized religion, but I understand the value of it. The good principles of biblical teachings. Can they get it from other places? Sure, you can get it from Aesop's fables as well. The question is, once you stop getting these basic principles of value of morality, um, these once you lose a fundamental anchor of uh, spiritual guidance, you're going to look for it somewhere else. You're going to look for the leadership. You're going to look for the answers, and you're going to look for the guidance from somewhere else. Which is why people turn to politics. People turn to other forms of idolatry, and then people also turn to drugs to fill the void of what is a spiritual void. So, I think people need it, and if they don't get it, we see the problems that we're seeing. All that long way to say, when it comes to things like the Texas law, I'm a born Jewish person, quite Jewish, can't get away from it. I wouldn't have a problem with it in any event, because on the one hand, I don't find that to be offensively overburdening from a spiritual or psychological perspective. I appreciate the fact that I'm not living in a country that abides by my religious law, and if I want that, I have that option. And to the extent that I'm living willingly so in another society, in a society that was built on certain principles, it would be audacious of me to say you've got to abandon those, because now in my current day of understanding of morality, I take offense with them, and so you change, not me, type of thing.
Well, yeah, and but change happens. Of course, change happens. If change didn't happen, we would still have horrific realities at the foundations of both the United States and in Canada. Of course, change happens. Now, having said that, I don't think, again, if we're going to have freedom of religion, religion can't inform law. And the further away we get from the beginning points and the days in which superstition and religion sort of created foundational realities of who we were and what we were allowed to do, the further we get from that means we are developing in my opinion, a more healthy, and I'm going to take it a step further, a more honest and real source of ethic and morality. Because my ethic and morality is not based on what's going to happen to me after I die. My ethic and morality is based on who I am here, how I act in this world, and what's bigger than me. Is it some mystical force that's controlling me or predestining, or is it something that is going to punish or reward me for my behavior after this world? If I'm basing my morality on that, I don't consider myself to be a moral person, anyways.
Well, I think that's a characterized version of religion and the role that it serves. The idea of heaven and the afterlife and following the
I
rules.
know
Now,
Judaism doesn't speak really about hell, so we're really talking about Christianity here.
yeah, but it's a character of religion. It's like abide by the rules and you'll go to heaven type thing, or you'll
But you're saying I look to religion. If I can't look to religion, I need something external to fulfill something that I'm searching for. And I think the quest for spirituality, you're right. I think the quest for spirituality, the quest for connection, because I think those two things are very, very different, I think is a fundamental human conscious desire. I agree with you 100%. But I don't think that looking to something external to you is finding the connection that is actually fulfilling. Maybe for some people, but I think the inherent connection, the thing that we really, and you'll see this when you find people that are like connected to a humanity on the basis of you can see their struggle, you can see their pain, what you're willing to do for that person who you don't even know. That's the connection. It has nothing to do with something external or above
well, what, but
or
someone will tell you, all right, well, the lesson of morality and spirituality and interhuman connection that you just fleshed out. Well, I can cite the biblical verse where it's said in exactly that way, but through old, biblical terms.
Sure, I'm not saying there's nothing of course, there is something let's be also honest, in every single religious text that I can pull out. When I teach world religions, you want to know what my kids get to after 12 major religions? They get to the end and they look at me and they say, we've just studied 12 of the same religions with different outfits and different days off. Honest to God, that's what they say. Because underpinning wise, because it's the philosophy, not necessarily the God. It's not the scripture.
No, but
It's
absolutely. But right now you're highlighting the fundamental primordial human value of religion.
sure
I agree. All 12, they have similar principles, different practices, and then even within Christianity, you'll have however many
a story.
subdivisions. But
30, I don't know.
the fact that they are all somewhat derivative of similar core underlying principles shows you that these principles, albeit materialized in a religious sense, are fundamental human condition principles, which is why.
Amazing. We do not need the pinup poster of a very latecomer to the game. Why don't we put up Zoroastrianism principles? It's the exact same stuff. If we're truly worried, hon, about people's moral and ethical leanings, if we are worried about the directionality of their life, why are we so concerned that it's a Christian methodology on that wall rather than being concerned with how do we teach values that you and I both agree with?
No,
Respect, education, empathy, cooperation. Why not teach those values? Why not put those up on a wall? Does that not make more sense than don't covet? Which, by the way, who doesn't covet?
I think we are saying the same thing. Whereas you're objecting to the antiquated formulation via the Ten Commandments. But if you have that one, the rules of a happy household, be
Well,
forgiving.
I'm rejecting the indoctrination is what I'm rejecting.
Yeah, and I'm saying you want to put up another iteration that's a non-religious iteration. You're talking about the same thing. You just want to have it your way, as opposed to the way it's been done since humans have been philosophizing about morality.
I just want to have it in the way that we're talking about the things that make good people. That's what morals and ethics we're talking about. We're talking about what makes us good in this time, in this space, now.
Well, and
Now. You got to know 50 years ago being gay, you're not being gay. No, absolutely not. You can't be gay.
uh,
Under under certain religious beliefs, right? And there's still lots of places where that's not true, and there's still some states where I'm not going anytime soon.
Well, that I think is, you might need to stop reading some news outlets, but there are certainly some countries where, as a practicing gay person, you probably don't want to go. Uh, is that to say that some of the old religious principles have been outdated? Like stoning your neighbor to death for infidelity. There are some. Is that to say that there are not some which are timeless and will last forever? There are some as well. The Ten Commandments might be more along the lines of ones that are not going to age badly versus stoning your neighbor. But flip side, and now I just forgot my thought. It had to do with religion. Oh, will there be a day when punching a Nazi because you deemed a person to be a Nazi is going to be a morally laudable thing? Or is that the product of people who need rules, who need morality, and find it in places that lead them to believe it's moral and justifiable to punch a Nazi? That's
Listen, there's lots of religions, and actually, I don't know if it's all of them that believe that sometimes violence is the answer.
I would
We've
need
seen
to.
it time and time again with different religions in different time periods, where in which they thought by saving souls, they either needed to convert or slaughter. And we don't need to go into that much history to understand that that's the principle. And again, stepping out of that for a second, and we're going to talk about what morality really should look like. At what point, having a good discussion, a philosophical discussion in a school about at what point is violence justified? Damn, that's a great conversation. That's a great conversation for
That
older
is.
kids and for
No,
grade threes.
well,
Just joking.
for kindergarten. Well, I mean, no, but even the things kids typically
Kindergarten
understand.
kids. Listen, it's so funny. We're saying not kindergarten kids, but watch who resorts to violence real damn quick. It's going to be the kid who stole the crayons and the other kid who wants them back. The lessons have to start there 100%. They just have to happen a bit
Well, no,
different.
and now I also have to be sure not to fall into the no true Scotsman fallacy, where okay, like, there has undoubtedly been violence committed in the name of religion for the saviors of the individuals. There has also been inhumane violence committed by non-religious or um, not even secular, but godless entities.
100%. Sure.
So the constant that we might want to just take away from that is there will be violence. The only question is, does that mean that you throw the baby out with the bathwater because violence carried out in the name of religion? Therefore, we must
No. And
place.
that's why I'm never, and again, I'm going to go back to this. I am never talking about throwing out religion in the sense of people's internal beliefs, deep rooted connection, and it brings them peace and it brings them joy and it brings them a sense of identity and a place in this world. I would never, never, never want to take that away from a person. I, however, do not think it has any place, those particular beliefs, those particular ideas, and that personal belief that they cannot prove nor I cannot disprove. There is no way that that should be sitting at the head of any table in a secular society, whether it be Jewish, Christian, the 18 denominations of Christian, the 30 denominations of
Well,
Christianity.
but then this goes just to the fundamental point: is a what is a secular society versus what is a religious society? And the question is going to be,
Great question.
well, a secular society means we're not going to, does it mean we're not going to impose anything on you, or does it mean that we're going to go scratch off the "in God we trust" on our pennies? And so there's a difference between a secular society
Both.
and a godless society. Yeah, so that's where I would say I still consider.
Canada doesn't even have pennies anymore.
No, that's well, thank inflation for that. Soon they're not even going to have toonies. It's just going to be, it'll be central digital banking currency. But no, that's the question, is where I don't even view that Ten Commandments as a religious non-secular
No, you
element.
don't. But I think that that's because you have to also understand. I don't really care because I am who I am. I believe what I believe, and I've grown up in a Christian society, right? You've grown up in a you're Jewish. You've grown up in a Judeo-Christian society. We have the luxury, for the most part, of saying, "Who cares? It doesn't really impress upon me. It doesn't really control me. It doesn't really." Serve to limit who I am and how I walk through this world? Of course it doesn't. Of course it doesn't. Because I love a good Christmas movie. Because I can't wait to buy a Christmas tree. Because I like Easter and looking for chocolate, even though I have no idea how those two go hand in hand. None of that impacts me, but I can be cognizant enough to understand how that ideal how that power, because we're not just talking about faith here, we're talking about religion. And I think you've discerned between the two, how the power of religion is just as terrifying, just as intrusive, just as domineering, and to put it in your words, as the power of too much big government and what they get to tell us and what they get to convince what? A grade one of? A grade two? We used to, I don't know if you remember this. There was a teacher in Alberta named James Keekstra. Have you ever heard of him?
Oh, well, that was the Nazi, the guy who's
There we go.
that's
For
the one
those
that
who
went to
don't know,
the Supreme
yeah,
Court
what a
decisions.
lovely piece of our history. There was a guy out in Alberta back in the 90s. I believe it was the 90s. He was a teacher for a solid 10 years. And every year he would teach that the Holocaust never happened, or to some degree it was exaggerated. And he would bring in a stack of books and he'd put them on his desk and he'd teach his grade 10 history class. And this would go on year after year until a Jewish kid happened to move to that part of Alberta, sat down in his class, learned his lesson with his stack of books, and turned around to everybody going, what the hell was that? And he goes home to his parents, or she, I don't know. And, and all of a sudden it all comes crashing down. That kind of belief system, that kind of structured imposition, I agree with you when we talk about how teachers need to be limited, because there needs to be fundamental limits. But I'll tell you what else. I talk about him constantly, constantly, because every kid should know one very important thing. I am your teacher. I don't agree with you that I'm some sort of an authority figure. I don't think that's what makes me a good teacher. I am your teacher. I want you to walk in here every single day, especially in the age of the computer and your cell phone and everything else that you have access to. And I want you to question every single word that comes out of my mouth, every single theory we talk about, every single piece of history that I give you from the textbook that's been pre-approved by the Ontario government. That's the job of a teacher. It's not narrowing the scope of that information. I would never narrow it. So if somebody really wants to talk about that teacher, and even more importantly, I've had kids talk about those books. Like, talk about, how does a book like that get made? Who backs that? Who published it? How does it become, this sort of standard of truth? And without those kind of conversations, which is why, and we're going to eventually get back to the teaching thing, this is why getting rid of any form of literature, any form of history makes me instantly uncomfortable.
Back up a bit for one
Yeah.
second, where you said it's not because it doesn't affect me that as if the suggestion is, and this is not a pointing finger. Well, it doesn't impact me, so therefore I have the luxury of ignoring it. I look at it a different way. It does affect me. The religious history of a country. I'm Jewish. I grew up in a Jewish milieu. I went to private Jewish school, so that's what I grew up with. If I went, and I did end up going to a non-Jewish private high school, LCC, Lower Canada College, for 2 years, where there were fundamental other religious things going on in the school. Whereas as a petulant child, I would say, well, this, I find this offensive, but I'm in the house of LCC now. I take a more analogous look as being living in Quebec as an Anglophone, and where I say, look, times are changing. It's time to loosen up your language laws. The world is getting westernized, anglicized. So, stop clinging to your old French and just get with the modern times. And that's what a lot of people say, Quebec, give up your identity. And I might be one of the rare Anglophones who say, look, this is a French province historically. It was built on these principles. This is what made the province what it is today where I live. I can understand the people wanting to impose certain laws to preserve that aspect of their historical cultural identity. And if I don't like it, there's other places for me to go. I do look at these religious underpinnings, which I don't consider to be religious in the religious sense, and say, look, it's a secular society that was built on these principles. It is what made the society one in which I want to live. And now it would be the other way around to say, like, I have the luxury of saying, thanks for building a nice house. Now I want to sort of destroy the foundation upon which that house was built by saying, yeah, we've moved past those principles that made this country what it is. And now it's the modern time. So erase God from the foundation of that country. And I say that's the privileged luxury that lacks the historical insight and the seeing into the future. What happens when you say it's not erasing history, but if you're saying, look, it's a secular society, so start erasing God from now I can't remember the name for it.
But you understand, like God on money, that's not an old invention.
Well, when did we put in God we trust on our
Well,
coins?
in the United States, it was later.
Well,
Check
later,
that
give or take.
out.
Let me see this. I had to also look up Keystra
Yeah,
because
yeah. Go ahead and look that up. I also think this. I think it's very problematic and to talk about the perfect foundations of a country that don't have perfect foundations. I also don't think that our country progressed and is this beautiful place. And I do love living in Canada, and I do like many aspects of the United States. And there's a lot of beautiful countries all over the world. I don't think that it's beautiful because of religion. I think it's beautiful because of people. And I think sometimes religion got people to certain places. And when we don't need the tradition anymore, when we're not cleaving to it like it's some sort of life raft and using it, let's also be honest, to discriminate, to oppress, to control, to enslave, when we let go of those things and we open it up to what it really is, the beauty of our world, it's us. It's not some supernatural creature that's telling us how to behave. It is people. And this is where we're going to disagree a little bit. I fundamentally believe that people are amazing. I believe fundamentally that human nature is good. I think we can do bad things, but I believe that fundamentally human nature is good. And that's not a religious belief. That is a people belief. And I also think that if we're talking about foundations, we have some serious cracks and water is flooding in by the second. I'm not erasing the history of us being a Christian, Judeo Christian nation. Let's be honest, Christian. I think it's funny when we say we're a Judeo Christian nation. I think it's real hilarious because I think at some point the Christian powers that be realized they didn't want to exclude and they couldn't really exclude the Jewish population from that lineage. But it's not too long ago we were saying crap like no Jew is too many. That was 1940 what? 5?
oh well, but I'll say this. Hold on, I had my thought. I had it formulated. Where it is like the one screen, two films where you're looking at certain negative and let's just call them disastrous or immoral parts of human history. And I know that you're thinking slavery, the no Jews is too many. I don't think that was religious. I think that was more cultural, immigrant based. But you look at the darker sides of history, at least in the West, and say, well, that you attribute it to religion, whereas I would say I would attribute fighting those darker periods of history to religion. Yeah.
I don't attribute it to religion. I attribute it to men using religion to do bad things.
Well, the Spanish Inquisition. Okay, they're using religion to do bad things.
It's all about power, right?
Well,
Isn't it?
But this is where this might contradict your theory that humans are fundamentally good. I don't think that they're bad. I think that the bad humans cause a lot more damage than the vast majority of good humans.
How they gain power, right? And what they use to gain that power and to manipulate that power.
Well, no, hold on. I have to stick to one thought at a time, though. It's not religion, but it is the religious principles, I think, that actually, I don't think they cause the darkest aspects of modern Western civilization. I think they actually serve as the basis to fight them. And so when people say, like, no, slavery was not built on religious principles, but it was fought on religious principles. And not religion per se, because yes, there's been a lot of bad stuff done in the name of religion. That being said,
But slaves existed in the Bible, right? The existence of slaves was a natural, and that's one of them. Don't covet thy neighbor's wife, ass, or slave, whatever beautiful language it used. Those aspects in the Bible were reflecting, and this is what, in my opinion, a lot of religious texts reflect. A religious text reflects a belief structure of the time, reflecting the context of when it was created. We talk about Jewish dietary laws. Those were brilliant. They're not brilliant necessarily because God said so. They're brilliant because you didn't die. That's why they were brilliant.
Well, but
eat pig. You get sick and die.
And Joe, I mean, they're still brilliant even today when it comes to certain types of food. And so again, But this is highlighting the value of the religion that you can actually somewhat
No,
dissociate from the
it's
religion itself.
highlighting the value of ideas people come up with and humans come up with, and they codify it as a religion in order to promote what they need at that time in that place. Listen, the reason why Texas wants to pass this law is it's clear as day. Women file, and if I hear this stat one more goddamn time, I'm going to lose my mind. What, 75, 80% of divorces. So all divorces, for the most part, are initiated by women. Texas wants that to stop. Texas wants divorce to stop. They want people to start having more babies, so they ban abortion and they force people to stay married once you've made that choice. It is no different than fornication under the command of the king. It is the same idea, the same mentality. How do we make sure our population, how do we control our population in order to elevate how many people are having babies, how they're staying together, because that's a better economic unit. We all know this. Divorce sucks economically for both sides, right? It is a divorce is a weight on the economic system. It is a weight on the stability of a community. All of that is true. And how do we get back at it? Well, we get back at it by bringing back traditional beliefs and using that to manipulate and codify and indoctrinate, whereby we really need to be talking about the bigger issues of what marriage is, how it happens, how,
I,
people have kids, what the laws are. Everything of that has been changing for 50 years.
well, I have no knowledge of this particular law, and I'm trying to think of
It's
not
not a law yet. I'm just
no
saying
the
it was an
proposal,
idea, right?
but
Yeah.
also there might be some other very real social reasons for attempting to change that, where there are certain inequities in the divorce process, in the family law process, that are fundamentally more unfair and disadvantageous to the male counterpart, where you might have
Listen,
divorces I say opportunistic. I think everybody should be
every
able to get
time
divorced.
I've seen it, it's a like in most places now, we're talking 50-50, 50-50 money, 50-50 kids, 50-50 everything. And that's the go-to. Even when, by the way, even when we could very easily prove or possibly prove that one parent is, and whether it's a guy or the girl, I don't care, but one parent is more suitable, more stable, a better parent. Even when that's the case, even when you have a better parent, the courts aren't allocating that. The courts don't take that into account. Not
Uh,
here, not in
well,
California, not in Florida, not in a lot of these states.
I am not convinced that that's accurate in terms of it being 50-50. I think there's still massive inequities when it comes to custody and other issues in the family law. And I'm not the manosphere. I mean, no, there's a lot of people who operate in this sphere. I'm
Well,
trying
it
to
would
think.
all be civil too, so it would be very different, I'm assuming, every place you go in the United States, right? We'd be talking about a pretty big overpinning of law.
I'm just trying to think if I had. I'm going to see now. I can't remember the name of the person who's been on the channel. Incredibly insightful, a woman. She was big in the men's rights sphere once upon a time. The name will come to me in a few seconds. I'm can't remember it, but no. But my understanding is that there are massive inequities in the family law court system, and perhaps this legislation or this proposal was an attempt to counter that. But no. Bottom line,
Yeah,
religion aside, everyone should be allowed to get divorced.
yeah.
Um,
I don't understand. Listen, I
but
can get married in a day. I should be able to get divorced in the same amount of goddamn time.
what
I should be able to sign that if I want to, and I should be able to tear it up, irrespective of fighting about money and kids and all of that. That's different. That's different. But an actual legal divorce, I mean, in Canada, in Ontario, for example, you you have to prove that you've been separated for a
for
full
a year.
year.
Well,
What?
true. No, but there's a logical reason for that, is that they want to make sure that people don't make rash decisions, then go and get
Stop it.
remarried
No.
afterwards.
The
But
government didn't ask me to make a logical, rash decision when I got married.
no,
No.
but there's value and stability of contracts from an entire social perspective. So
Sure, but when you're breaking a contract and there's clear delineation about what the broken contract looks like, there's not a lot of fighting that goes on there either. You
but
talk about family law in Ontario, and it's real simple. What are your assets? What are your debts? Do you have kids? Everything gets divided 50. It's not even, you'll have a lawyer that say you don't even need a lawyer. It's that clear. The only time you need a lawyer is when there's abuse or there's any of those horrible things, or somebody's doing a really good job about hiding assets. And it's never the women. Everybody's like, oh, the poor men hiding. Look, I want to know how many women have hidden houses and money. I want to know. I want to
Well,
know that.
look, these is stuff where I would make sure that I know what I'm talking about before venturing into it. For the time
I
being, I'm
know
still driving it.
nothing. I'm just talking.
No,
Well, I know.
but
I'm on straight a lot.
the idea of having to live apart for a year before you formalize the divorce, you could disagree on policy, but there's a very logical reason for that. Is that you don't people get into fights, they go through 2 weeks of badness, and then they get divorced, and then oh well, we regret it, let's get it back together.
But again, you're asking, I can't believe you of all people are advocating the state to be able to tell me when I can be or cannot be
They're not
rash.
telling you when, they're just saying
Yes,
look,
they are.
the
Yes,
state.
they are. They're saying, no, think about it, little girl. Sit down and have a good thought about it because we know better. No,
No,
no.
well, I don't think that's what they're saying. I think they're saying is, look, if
And it's left over from the days where we couldn't get a divorce anyway, which
uh,
isn't that long ago, or it
yeah,
was really hard anyway.
yes, but I don't view it that way as the state saying, look, I'll tell you when. The state is saying, look, we understand the nature of heated fights. If you're going to get divorced, make sure that it's a definitive decision. I know. The other thing is, agree or disagree with it. That's not going to be my make or break limit as to what the government tells me to do. That pisses me
Think
off.
about it. Think about this for a second. Honestly, let's say two people get married and divorced and it's a disaster. And all of a sudden they get married one day, they want to get divorced the next day. Boom, gone, stability to the wind. But let's say those two people never get married but decide to have a kid. There's the lack of stability. There's the rashness. And there lies the real social damage of erratic choices and fly by the seat of your pants kind of behavior that brings whole other living entities into this world, into that dynamic. Which one should the government be talking about? Because I know you're not going to say they should be able to tell people when they can have kids, but
No.
that one we can agree, would directly cause way more harm to this society than the latter.
Yeah, but look, I can play devil's advocate and say there's a fundamental difference. Is that one is the government telling you what you is setting certain parameters once you've entered into a contract, and the other one is the government preemptively telling you what you can and cannot do with your body. If you want to get married, and you want to get the government benefits that come along with getting married. Well,
what are those benefits? By the way,
tax benefits. I think
to earn more money, obviously, to see what benefits, big tax benefits I get.
Well, no, I think there are certain financial tax deductions and whatever. But the bottom line, you can't say, look, I want to get the government benefits, so I'm going to get married, but then I don't want the government having any say as to, there on in. That's just
Why? Government benefits only last as long as you're married. As soon as you're divorced, those government benefits cease to exist.
No, but true. But the bottom line is you're saying, look, I want to adhere to a government run program. Okay, well then look, once you get into it, you'll make sure that you're certain when you want to get out of it. Again, but these are not. Look, I don't care about this issue one way or the other.
Well, I think they all matter.
I'm not.
Matter. Let's steer it back to where we were in the beginning, because I think it all matters, because I think the most fundamental thing about all of the things we're talking about, whether you're talking about what people search for in this world, whether you're talking about a stable population, whether you're talking about what the government should and should not be allowed to do and how they should be able to sort of set policy or rules for our life, that all starts with education. And I'm being real clear and real honest. And I'll talk about Ontario because I really can't speak to curriculum in Florida, even though I have talked about books and stuff like that. I'll be real honest. The curriculum and the money that we spend, if we really were interested in stability, if we were really interested in a intelligent, diverse, powerful base population, we would spend boatloads more money on education, and we would not be talking about what a parent gets to decide should or shouldn't be on a possible reading curriculum, because those decisions should be made and I think this is an interesting conversation, should be made by the people who study it, by the people who have dedicated their lives to it, by the people who have become professionals at it. Just like I don't want a parent deciding what the national policy on medical care should be because they don't know.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people are going to say, despite what teachers think, it's not teaching is
By the
not.
way, it's not just me though, right? Because I don't set the curriculum.
No, but
Teachers don't set the curriculum.
I also don't, and I also don't want you to think this is an attack on you. But there are people.
No, no, no.
The issue is going to be like, one can accept that there are levels of scientific expertise that might not, like people who, again, I'm not comparing teachers to cab drivers, but and there's no but. You're going to say like, okay, well, they're the professional, so
I'm
don't tell
not
it.
comparing
No, no,
teachers
because like,
to
hey, he's the taxi driver. Don't tell him how to get you home. Although sometimes you might. A teacher, you say, look, I'm the teacher, I'm the professional, so don't tell me how to teach. Parent, leave it to professionals. There's levels of expertise where even, and by the way, even when it comes to the highest level of expertise, like doctors, I'm the doctor. Don't tell me how to do my job. That's true, but at the end of the day, it's up to the patient or the person to say, I don't care that you're
Sure.
the expert. I'm going to make my own decision.
Listen,
Notwithstanding.
and there's all sorts of agency when it comes to students and when it comes to parents within the educational system. What I'm advocating and what I'm saying is two things. Number one, I am not the professional. It is not just me. That's what I'm saying. I would never ever assume or be so arrogant as to think I know best. What I think is you put people in a room with child psychologists, you people in a room of academics, you put people in a room who have studied child development and the way the brain works and what they need to learn at which time, and you match it to physiology, and they come up with a curriculum that reflects that in a real adequate way. And then you have a parent sitting at home going, I don't want them reading the latest Amanda Gorman poem. No.
Well, I'll say two things to this. One, that might be a very lofty scientific way of describing the learning process, and that doesn't apply mutatis mutandis to the curriculum, the determination of curriculum. Second thing I would say, I'm knocking my head on my mic here. The
So you're saying, wait a minute, sorry. The first point you're saying that child development and child psychology isn't they you don't think that they tie that to curriculum? You don't think
Uh,
those?
I think the science behind the brain development, when certain emotions, when certain processes, object permanence, when that develops, is a
Yeah, it's
scientific
not
process.
perfect. Sure.
But I would, and maybe I'm not correct in this, but I don't think I'm not correct. I don't think the curriculum is based on the scientific development of the human brain and the psychological development of kids, and if it is, very tangentially. The curriculum is.
Would you appreciate it if it were more reflective of that? Would you give it more
No,
weight?
because we are talking about systems and not curriculum. And so, understanding that at a certain age a kid can't do algebra is different than saying this
No,
is
that's
the
not what
book.
I'm talking about.
No,
Yeah.
no, but the flip side is also to this is that historically the schooling institutions have been responsible. I mean, if we're looking back at like the bad institutions of the past and where certain atrocities have been performed, well, the schooling institutions, if left to their own devices, don't always come up with the right solutions and don't always do the right thing. And so to say that, this is the institution of education, now leave us alone because we're the experts,
Nope.
that
I never said leave us alone. I actually say quite the opposite. I say quite the opposite. I would say that a teacher's responsibility and a parent's responsibility, both equally, is to keep that door wide open, keep the communication consistent, keep the awareness of what's going on in that classroom constantly, as well as the parent keeping the teacher apprised of what their kid needs, what they're going through, so that we can do our jobs properly. That's the only way education works, the only way. But that way does not necessitate me telling them how to parent and them telling me how to teach. It does say this book is on the curriculum. If you don't like it, that's okay. You can talk to your kid about it. Guess what? You're still the parent. You still have all the power in the world. But for you to say and for you to demand that this shouldn't be made available to other kids, in that age bracket at that school because you don't want it anywhere around them, then yeah, I have a huge problem.
Well, we can always get hung up on the gray zone aspect. We agree that American Psycho should not be reading material for a grade sixer.
Never read it, but the movie was gross.
The movie was paled in comparison to the book. But
Can I say this? Hold on, before we go down this road, I will also. What grade level was that? Who was reading American Psycho?
Nobody. I had a teacher in high school, after reading one of my short stories, tell me you might want to read. You might like Bret Easton Ellis's.
And go read. And how old were you?
16, 15. But it wasn't that she said, "Here, go do it." It was more like, check with your parents first. And my mom was, let me watch Reservoir Dogs when I was in grade 5, so she didn't care. But like, I guess the issue is we can agree on the black and whites. Like pornography, we can agree. Like we don't have to have a debate. No pornography.
Oh, okay, yeah, but here's the problem.
Yeah.
Can you define it? Because Anne Frank got taken out of a school in Canada, in Ontario, because there's a part of Anne Frank, which I didn't even know about because it's been so long since I've read that. There's a part of Anne Frank that is sexual. Like there's this tiny little caveat that is sexual. And the parent said, pornographic. I want it off the curriculum. And they took it off. Kitchener-Waterloo in Ontario is a situation. I don't understand what's going on there. Is that pornographic?
Well, I mean, if I have to go back and reread that. But for example, I mean, let's take an example that's fresher.
Talking about a woman, actually, I think the implication was that she was a lesbian, or there was talk that was so it wasn't just a matter of.
No, not that. I suspect the implication was more not that she was a lesbian, but that she's an underage kid, and so this might actually be, by Canadian legal standards, depiction of children engaging in. I don't remember. I don't know.
She didn't engage in anything. She just said
I don't. Diary. I know she didn't engage in it. I have just that example. I don't know offhand, but let's take Train Spotting, for example, where I was saying one of my favorite movies of all time, and then someone said to me, "Oh,
I'm sorry, stop right now."
Yep.
Train Spot, we need a whole podcast and we need to talk about what's gone on in your life up until this point where Train Spotting is your most favorite.
It's top 10, and I went to see Train Spotting like 7 times in the theater.
We need a whole thing where we talk about our top 10 movies.
And Pulp Fiction is top 10 movies.
I could have guessed that.
So I was having the discussion with someone, and they said, "Well, what about the CP scene in that movie?" And I'm like, in my memory, I haven't seen it admittedly in 20 years.
Yeah, it didn't even register.
And now that would be an example where I would say, okay, like I can appreciate someone saying that's inappropriate for any levels of school. Don't show it if you're taking a film class.
Right.
I can't. So Anne Frank, I don't remember even what the part of it was.
But I should have brought it. I should have brought it home. Yeah, I just.
Well, no, but the question is this then. Because it sounds like what you're saying is, well, who's to say what's pornographic? And so we can't.
Somebody has to say it, though, right?
Well, I agree.
That's all I'm
saying. Between you and me, we can say, look, American Psycho, inappropriate objectively. If it's on a curriculum, I would expect parents to demand to be removed. We can agree on that.
I've never read it. Is it because of all the blood? Is there too much sex? I don't really remember.
There's sex. There's axes to the face. I mean, there's like it's
axes to the face.
Yeah, that reading that scene. My goodness, the movie did not do it justice. The movie was a cartoon.
Teaching it. Can I tell you though, as a teacher, the hardest thing that I ever have to do isn't what I think is hysterical. Because if we're going to start talking about what's appropriate and inappropriate on curriculum, let me be real clear. Nobody gives a crap about violence. Nobody.
There is indeed a double standard. But I can tell you this. Did we talk about this when we were live? That I think I understand the reason between the two is that nobody gives a crap about violence because very few people are going to be prone to going out and replicating the violence for pleasure or for entertainment. The same is exactly not true of sex. And so when a kid sees a super violent movie like Rambo, they're going to.
I said to you, teenagers need no external drive in order to do whatever it is they're going to do with their boyfriends and girlfriends.
I would disagree with you, and I actually think this is one of the going back to Train Spotting. I was in the theater alone because I used to go watch movies only alone, and I sat next to somebody who happened to be a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
I know. So I sit next to somebody who happens to be a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I forget which. And he says, "What are you watching a movie alone for?" I said, I like watching movies alone. And he says, what are you watching movies like this for? And I said, I like this. I mean, this is a great movie. He says, the problem with watching movies like this is that it conditions you to tolerate and think that the bad things you do are acceptable and tolerable because they're not as
Believe
bad.
that?
Sorry, a thousand
Really?
percent. Uh, th-
So you believe that violence in movies desensitizes us to violence?
no, 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 no. What I believe is that seeing other people's moral depravity exceeding one's own foibles is oftentimes serves as the excuse for the person to say, well, I'm not that bad because other people are worse. And so when it comes to replicating sexual activity, for example, or being inspired to because you saw it somewhere else, I sure as hell think that if people watch the movie Kids, especially if kids go watch the movie Kids, they're going to say, well, I'm not doing that. So have you never seen Kids?
Yeah, I have. That's an
Yeah,
old one. I haven't
that's an
seen it
old
in a long
one.
time.
It's a gross. I mean, I do think when it comes to violence, people don't say, "Well, beating up the guy is not as bad because at least I didn't shoot him with an RPG like in Rambo." But when they do see, like, well, other kids are doing this type of sexual stuff, so what I'm doing is not so bad. I think that is behavior that is far more quickly imitated to a lesser degree, and they can say, "Well, I'm not as bad as this, therefore it's acceptable." I think maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I'm just an old man, but uh,
Two things. I don't agree with
same
you,
with
but I have
drugs.
I have two questions.
Yeah.
I have two questions. Number one, do you think by having it on the curriculum, somehow we're advocating the violence more, or especially in this day and world, like let's be honest, if a 15-year-old wants to see a movie,
They'll go see it.
their parent, I don't care who you are, even Matt Walsh, who has chained his kids to the bow and arrow set in the backyard. One day those kids will get out of that house and they will watch whatever the hell they want to watch. And the more that you've kept it from them, I also promise you, this is also human nature, watch what they watch now. Do you think, though, possibly, I'm not advocating for American Psycho to be played. Think of more of the nuanced middle ground movies or books that we're talking about, right? Do you think that talking about violence in movies or talking about sexual depictions of people and the way it's depicted and creating an academic conversation surrounding it has value and weight that actually would serve to do quite the opposite of what you're talking about?
Well, I'll say this: it depends on at what age, which I think is the crux of this.
Sure. That's always a
I
conversation. Yeah.
but I would venture to say, discussions of sexuality um, among teachers and students is
What do you
probably
mean
some.
by that? Can you?
Well,
Because I teach grades 7 and 8 health. Heaven friggin' help me.
biology
So
is different, but biology is different than sexuality.
Well,
That
no,
that's
but I teach health. So when I teach health, let me describe what's in the Ontario curriculum. I have to teach obviously STIs. And when I talk about STIs, I have to talk about all the ways in which you can contract them. Okay? So I have to talk about all of the different aspects when people are like, "Why are you talking about anything but intercourse?" I'll tell you why. Because grade 8s are doing it. We're pretending they're not, but they are, and that's a part of the curriculum. So number one, I talk about that. Number two, I have to talk about um, consent. I have to talk about, like, that's a big one. Consent is pretty huge in the grade 7 and 8 curriculum. I also have to talk, heaven help me, about internet pornography. Oh,
well, I think
go
this.
ahead. How do you have that
Well,
conversation?
I don't. I'm
I
not sure.
have.
I'm not sure.
That's the.
I,
You're not sure I should.
I'm not sure. In fact, this sounds even more. What's the word I'm looking for? Subversive than I could have possibly thought. Now I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, kids need to know about STDs or STIs.
Hmm.
All right, uh, that should be parent discussion. Oh, the parents aren't going to do it. Well, not all
Hmm.
parents are going to be equally as good, and in the same way that not all teachers are going to be equally as good. But when it comes to making certain types of mistakes with children, I think those are only the types of mistakes that the parents have the luxury or the obligation to
You're
make or to
talking
not make.
about, look, sex education has been proven time and time and time again to protect, to educate, to reduce risk factors to those individuals. And that is, I can't think of a more important part about education,
I
to
want
be
to. I,
honest.
I I would
Before
actually
math and science,
let me see this. Has sex ed decreased pregnancy? Let's see that pregnancy. Then we're going to get into another one. Pregnancy rates. Let me see this here, or STD rates. Let me see here. I don't want to waste too much time here about the National
Yeah.
Institute of Health, the NIH, for whatever we can trust these institutions for now. A
Oh my
consistent
God.
finding
I
from
love it when you pull up the NIH in this context and
no, I
you'll
haven't.
you'll
I haven't even read it. But I'm just saying. This is, by the way, this is the nefarious effect of having been lied to by the professionals. Like, okay, I'm
yeah,
not.
you're like, what am I supposed to believe here? Yeah.
A consistent finding from observational studies that rely on regression analyses of survey data
What
is
does that
that
mean?
comprehensive, I don't know, comprehensive
Oh,
sex education is associated with lower pregnancy risks at a later age, first sex, and increased probability of contraception, 29 to 31. I don't know if that's ages. Um,
I'll tell you
you
what.
know, I'm gonna look. I would be curious.
Yeah, we can talk about it in another thing because I think it's important to talk about too. Like one of my scariest jobs ever was grade 9 health, my very first year of practice teaching in a room full of 30 14-year-old girls. And and again, everybody's denying or pretending as though this isn't happening or it's not what reality is. And I'm living in a world of reality in which I want kids educated to their fullest. And I do not believe in any way, shape, or form that me educating them on the risks of sex and the risks of unprotected sex in any way, shape, or form makes their life worse or encourages their behavior
I,
to do immoral and dangerous thing. And
no,
I
but
think it's quite the opposite. But I'll tell you this.
with when it this is where I'm trying to think of like a distinction that is not verifiable, but delineated.
It's so hard, but
Well,
that's
I
the
know
point.
I do make the distinction at biology versus sexuality. Now we're going back
What's
to
this?
what that was, and I'm trying biology being how things work versus sexuality being what people prefer. And when it comes now, I'm
Oh, I
thinking,
don't care about look, it's all very mechanical. I don't want to talk about any sort of preferences. I don't want to talk about any of that. But if we're going to only talk about intercourse as a means to get pregnant or contract an STI, it's dangerous.
well,
And I'll
no,
tell you why
but
it's dangerous.
okay, please, and I'll remember my thought.
Grade 9 girls, 14 years old. I had a question box at the end of my freaking desk where they put at the end of the day whatever their question was, and I took home this horrible box and had to open up all these questions and decide how in the hell am I going to answer them the next day. 5 of the questions were, if I have anal sex, can I get pregnant if I don't use a condom? That's their reality. That's their reality. I am not there to champion it. I am not there to shame them. I am there to make sure these young, very young girls are not putting themselves in a dangerous situation and are understanding the full scope of what's going on in that
Well,
particular dynamic.
no, but and with that example, we're gonna have to get back to the online porn and the
So
consent issue,
scary.
but that I'm putting this into my own perspective as to when we did sex ed and our professor's name was Mr. Dixon, if you can actually believe that.
Stop
Um,
it.
no,
He
I
should
swear
have
to
been.
you, his name was Mr. Dixon, and he taught us sex ed. Um, I see. I might be able to fit that within the dichotomy of biological reality versus
Yeah,
sexual
sure.
preference. And you say, okay, fine. And how do you have that? I mean, it's, again, age appropriate. And then the question is, where's
Age
the end?
appropriate, they were asking.
Where's the end of that discussion?
That's a
Um,
great question.
but I mean, I get like sex ed. It's either that or you give a pamphlet or you say we don't talk. That I don't think is where people get hung up as much because that
I think it
again,
is. Oh, I think it is. But where do you think they get hung up?
I think they get hung up when it goes from biology to preference. When it goes
What, okay,
from
what does that lesson look like to you? What is preference?
I mean, actually, explain to me at what point anybody would be talking about online pornography
Oh,
in a
so
school
in the
setting.
curriculum, it talks about that you're supposed to, because again, if you think your grade 7 and 8 hasn't looked at online pornography, I don't know where you're living. Of course they have. They've done it with their friends. They've done it on their phones. They've done it at their friend's house. I don't care. They've tried to do it at school. Um, the point of it in that curriculum is to say the risks, is to say the lack of authenticity, is to talk about the dangerous caveats that you can go down that road when you're not of age, when you're not supposed to be, right? Because technically you're not supposed to be looking at that until you're 18, but you click the button, moving on with your day. So it's in the warning aspect and talking about it in the coming from a perspective of like nobody's talking about what's on it. We are saying, look, you can get some pretty horrible graphic images and pretty horrible examples of what sex looks like, but to warn them about the dangers of that, of not talking to their parents about it. I tell my kids to talk to their parents every single day. But I promise you, first of all, the grade 7 and 8, they don't talk to me about it either. They don't want to talk to anybody about it. Want to know who they talk about it to? Each other. That's it. They don't talk about their parents. If a parent calls me up and says, Joanna, what are you doing in the curriculum? I will send, as I always do, my entire syllabus, my entire set of notes, my entire, span of what I teach and how I teach it. So they know exactly where I stand, exactly what's in the curriculum. My problem is this. Want to know who the parents are that are the biggest problems? By far, the ones that don't take the time to call. They won't respond to emails. They don't sit down and talk to their kids. And they have never looked at the pages and pages of documentation or syllabi that I have sent them.
This is
Now what?
well, I say that I'm thinking to myself as you say this. So like, you talk about the risks of online porn, and by incidentally, there's a legal reason why I can think that you have to have these discussions as well, because underage kids sending each other nude pictures of each other, which they're doing, creates
Sent.
massive legal problems.
Yep.
Then the flip side is, okay, well, where do you draw the limit? You have to show them an example of what online
No,
pornography, and not you,
absolutely
not you, but now, and I'm Googling at the same time to see where there have been examples of this, where they're like, well, we're only showing them the pornography so that they know what to look out for, type thing. And that's, I mean, it's
I
the,
want to know. I am sorry.
yeah.
In where have they put porn on the TV in school?
Oh, no. The only story I can read right now is a
What
kid.
prison did that teacher go
Oh,
to?
well, I have to find I have to find the concrete examples, because what people always invariably end up fighting over are the gray zone examples, which people then use to try to erase the rule. But then you read an example of a kid who's reading from a book that was on their curriculum, and it reads like softcore pornography, if only for one scene. It's not Anne Frank, but it's one that I think most people would agree with. The bottom line is that most people agree with the cut and dry black and white examples of too much or too far. Like, banning Michelangelo's David because it's ding dong showing is too far. I think we can all agree on that.
But apparently not for some.
Well, but
That's the problem.
that is the problem, is that there will always be activists on one end and the other. But flip side, maman veut what is it? Ma sœur veut un zizi. My sister wants a penis, and you have a children's book of a kid playing with her brother's penis, and it's like, and graphically drawn. Can we agree that that's a problem? And
First of all, I don't know the book, so
I won't even bring it up now, but
what it sounds like, and I don't know what age that's for, and I don't know what in context that's been used for. Because the only thing I've seen online, unfortunately, repetitively, is that one graphic novel that everybody has like.
yeah,
It's this.
the
It's
BJ.
the one. Yes. Right. And they keep posting that on my Twitter page as though this is what's going to end society. Listen, I'm not am going to sit here and say we should be handing out graphic novels like that to the grade 3 kids. I'm also going to say this to delusional parents who think you are protecting your kid or stopping them from doing something because you don't want them to see a graphic novel. Let's say when they're 15, 16 years old. Oh, honey,
Yeah, but
you're
that
not being honest about who kids
that's
are and what
that's
they're
not
doing and what risk factors they're
no, but
having.
that's not the argument. The argument is going to be, if my kids are going to do bad things, and sort of your suggestion presupposes, or at least takes into consideration, that it is objectively bad. They're going to do bad things anyhow, so it may
I
as well
don't.
be the teachers
Well,
that
no,
expose them
that's a
to it.
moral distinction, right? So now we're saying are teenagers experimenting with each other, is that a bad thing? And I'm saying I'm not going to make that moral distinction. I am going to want them to be two things, very, very importantly. I want them to have full control and full consent of their bodies at all time and feel empowered by that. And number two, and a very close second, no matter what you choose to do, how you choose to do it, I want you to be 100% safe so you don't die from it. I think I'm not the one imparting morality. The other side is. I
No,
am not the one
well,
telling somebody what's right or wrong. I'm telling you what just scientifically is.
empowerment with one's body sounds like sexualizing versus biology
But
being
it's
this
not,
is how it
though.
works.
When I say empowerment, I mean every single person, and I believe this should be taught from freaking kindergarten. Every single person should be told their body is their body. Nobody, not a single person has the right to touch you anywhere you don't want to be touched. And I think that lesson every parent should be like, yes, I'll make the flag for that
It's a song.
because
My body's no one's but mine. You touch your own body, let me touch mine. I remember that from childhood. But we're in a
but
dip.
they're taking that away now because they're starting to say because it can extend it into like okay well what if like I have my friend's kid is 4 years old and every time I go over there some days he likes me some days he does not. I always want to hug him hello, always, right? um and Anna, my partner, always goes and I'm like, what? Let him decide. There is something so friggin' powerful about that lesson. And that's a lesson for me because I would just pick him up and hug him because I'm just, but how powerful is that lesson for me to give him? And I say it to him, do you want to hug me? If you do, cool. If you don't, amazing. You don't have to. But I'm telling you right now, you very well know that the majority of people aren't going to be on side with that. But I'm telling you, you want to stop people with nefarious goals getting at kids? We all want to stop that, right? Start by giving them power over their own bodies to decide every step of the way.
Yeah,
That's
no, but we're talking about two different things at this point in time, and the it goes back to the question as to where the line between parent, teacher, and exists, and then the question is going to be: you teach them biology, you teach them about condoms, you teach them about STDs and how they're transmitted, and then the question comes up: well, will doing it in the butt prevent me from getting pregnant? Well, that's a no with a but or a yes with an and, pun intended. The question then
the
becomes,
scariest day of teaching I've ever had. I'll
well,
tell you
I
right
know,
now.
and I can tell I knew I think they lied about how they got pregnant. This was my friends now is how their parents say they got pregnant. I think they might have been covering up for what they actually did. But the question is then where does the class end? Where does the discussion end? Even if we say okay, fine, kids need they get to the right age, they need to learn about STDs and protection. Fine, I think some
Yeah.
people are going to say no. Here's the
And
thing is,
those people, and here's what I would say, honest to God, this is how I would structure it. This week, this is what I'm talking about. If you want to pull your kids out of this class, you have a choice to pull your kids out of this class, but you have no control, and nor should you have overriding power to pull, change, or adjust curriculum that is necessary, proven, scientific, and based in reality. Go ahead and pull your kid out. By the way, your kid's just going to ask the other kids the next day.
well, but that doesn't mean it's right. That just means that they're
I'm
going to
just
get
saying.
around the issue is,
As a parent, though, I'm saying let's be aware of what reality is and how to address it. I think it's hysterical. We're focused on books. I really do. I really think it's funny.
well,
We think kids.
I think that sorry, the focus on the books is a red herring itself because
Yeah.
I've said to you, like they've banned books in Southern California. Ban. First of all, I always say like you got to use words
Take it out of the
properly.
school. Take it out of the curriculum.
Take them out of the
Yes.
curriculum. They've done it in Southern California. Nobody complained. They do it in Florida. People complain. This is where I think ultimately, the issue gets politicized where people just lose track of what the discussion is.
100%.
I think most people agree some books inappropriate and would have no problem with it. That's why they did it in Southern California. But even when they did it there, other
What book
people,
was banned in Southern California?
Huckleberry Finn for one of them, which I think
I don't agree with it.
no, of course I don't agree with it, but for in the cases of when it's obvious, clearly egregious, sex for the sake of sex, violence for the sake of violence, historical classics, absolutely not. I had a video that I
There
did.
goes my world history class.
Well, no, but not. I went to the Met and I was with my kids, and I decided to make a funny video. I called it "The Penises of the Met," where I just made a montage of all of the statues' penises because they were different sizes. YouTube demonetized it. They and confirmed it after manual review, gave it an 18 and over. And I was like, that's a little Puritan. But then meanwhile, YouTube does that. And then the same people who are ideologically aligned with YouTube say, how dare Florida do this? And I say, look, there's a gray zone where people are going to fight over the Huckleberry Finn because of the use of the N-word. And there's a black and white where people
Oh
are
my
going to
God.
agree.
What an important book. What an important book to talk about
Of Mice
on
and
many
Men. I think Of Mice
of
and Men
many
was another
different
one.
levels. We did Of Mice and Men at my school. There's not many books that I have ever read, that I've ever seen on any curriculum. Now I realize there's, a book in one county in Arkansas. I don't know. I can't talk about all of that. I can only speak to what I've seen and what I've read. And do books and can literature make people feel uncomfortable because of the subject? Like Huck Finn and using the N word and it should make you uncomfortable. That at this point should be the point of the book.
No, just the idiocy is that that's offensive and should be banned because of the use of the N word. But then you can have
Oh,
WAP or you can have Takeshi 99. I mean, the rap songs which use it over
I
over and
don't,
over
I
again.
wouldn't ban, but you got to know this is where I'm sort of on that other side of the fence in the sense that education and censorship do not go hand in hand. You cannot have education when you have rampant censorship. And in this day and age, today, 20 years ago, we could be having a very different discussion. But today, oh my God, the things the kids will come in and say they watched on their phone. I'm like,
No,
oh my
there's no question. But
God.
I think the issue is also that when it comes to the curriculum and the issue of prohibiting books in the curriculum and parents freaking out over what would otherwise be non-issues, it is in the broader context of what the teachers are talking about with kids that have absolutely no business in either reality, science, academia. And I mean, we know what we're talking about here, and it's
But then I think you're talking about people doing bad jobs. Like let's say we agree on a teacher that has completely crossed the line, whatever that line is for us. And I'm like, "Oh my God, that's not
well.
okay
Let's
what they did."
how about
I've seen
teacher?
videos of what teachers have done in classrooms where I'm like, they have to be in jail now. Let's agree to that. You cannot build a system of educators where you censor everything because you're trying to avoid that. Because what I also promise you is this: bad teachers, bad workers, bad politicians, bad whatever, guess what? They're not going to give a crap about it anyways. So, the best we can do, in my opinion, as a parent, if I was a parent of a kid, I'd want to know what's going on in that classroom every day. I'd have constant conversations with that teacher.
No,
I'd have constant open conversations with my
well,
kids.
for
But
sure,
I
but
promise you, the parents that are the loudest aren't. They're not having
no.
conversations with either.
True. Now, but let's just say, like, in the clearest of cut cases, when the teacher crosses the line, go to jail, whatever.
Yes, fire them. Bye.
If one were to find out that a teacher would be, surreptitiously influencing a child to convert religions from, say, Islam to Judaism, Christianity to Judaism, Christianity to Islam, we would say that that's they should, teaching religion and aiding a student in converting because his parents will get mad if they find out are two very different things. One crosses the line, the other one doesn't. I mean, would we be able to agree on that?
Sure.
Okay.
How would I aid a conversion?
Oh, the kid says, "I need you to teach me about this. What can I read? If my parents find out, they're gonna kill me."
So you would say, "Oh, that's an interesting one. That's a hard line. It really is." First of all, I wouldn't know enough about religion, but like in that kind of way. So you're saying that if a kid came to me and their family is Christian and they want to be Jewish and they're like, "Listen, I really want to be Jewish, but my mom thinks it's
I
horrible.
took your
Can I
class.
read the
You
book?"
gave me the world religions. I realized I got the wrong one. I'm curious to learn more. If my parents find out, they'll kill me. What can I do to read about converting to Judaism? Or
And what and I say, "Well, you're going to have to ask your parents about that."
well, no, but I mean, the question would be:
Or I would say,
is
yeah,
that
no, no, no. So my options would be, you're gonna have to ask your parents about that, or here's a book to read about religion.
well? There's a third option, which is
Call the parent.
the Donnie Darko, which is I just can't have that conversation with you.
I don't know how many of those conversations I have. The first thing I would say to that student, to be honest, if this was a legitimate thing, why are you afraid of your parents? I think we should have your parents in. That's a legitimate, if a kid comes in, no kid's ever done that, right?
I know.
If a
Well,
kid
but
legitimately comes in and says, I'm terrified of what my mom will do if I read about Judaism,
no.
what?
But if I want it, I want it. You know where I'm going with this is the bottom line is where
And the
people.
same thing is true for where you're going to get to. My question is, are you afraid of your parents? Because that's the most important question. Because otherwise, I open the door for a big conversation. I open the door for conversations with parents, with students, with doctors, with anybody they want to bring in. But if I have a kid who sits in front of me and says, I'm afraid of my whoever because of anything, as a teacher, I have to take that fear very, very seriously. Shouldn't I?
Uh, uh,
What if a kid came in and said, I'm dating a black student and I'm white? If my dad finds out, he's going to beat the crap out of me. What do I do?
Uh, th- th- well, I think this would be one of those questions. This would be one of those situations where I say, "I'm sorry." I have to think about this, but my initial reflex is to say,
Hard
this
though,
is not a
right?
conversation I can have with you."
No, I have a student. You have a student that says they are in potential danger.
Well,
They are,
you can, but you can. This is now
now what?
you can frame it so that you say like, "Oh, if they're telling me that I'm going to get beaten tonight, and there's been evidence of it, and you have
No,
there's
you
reason to
don't need
take it seriously."
evidence. I just need evidence that it might happen. I don't need evidence that it's
Well,
happened.
no, but evidence that it might happen would be, I'm just going to freeze my camera again, would be more than a student, perhaps flippantly saying, I'm scared of my parents. Or even
Well, then,
because,
if a student flippantly said that, my first conversation would be, honest to God, on any of those fronts, right? Are you genuinely afraid of your parents? And I'd wait for that answer. Because if the answer is no, not really, I said, great, then this is a conversation for all of us. I'll have it with you, I'll be here with you, but let's call them and have them in. If you're genuinely afraid, if you think they're going to hurt you, we have a different line that we need to go down.
I can appreciate that. But then I can also appreciate where this goes absolutely haywire. If a student looking for attention has a fight and says,
Sure.
let's open this can of worms and get the administration in. And if, but in the apps, it's the
I
first time
always think
ever.
if a student is looking for that kind of attention and is willing to put that stuff on the table, holy shit, we need to give it to them too. Maybe
Well,
for very different reasons.
possibly, but they also might just have no concept of the consequences of that type of attention seeking.
Well,
But
I'm talking about adults, right? Like, I
if,
mean, not adults. I'm talking about older teenagers too,
no,
right? I'm not
but
talking.
a student comes up to you and says, "If my parents find out that I'm dating a black kid, they're gonna beat me." Uh, I can see the questions that you'd have to have as a
I would
follow up
also
to that.
talk to administration about that.
Yeah. Now that, but the question is, says, you say the conversion is where the conversions where I'm going with this. Do we agree that in engaging in or allowing what now has become the talk of the day, a child says, I don't tell my parents that I want to
Mhm.
that I identify as a male. That's a
Mhm.
discussion that you say like, well, why don't you want to tell your parents? Because they'll get mad at me. Um,
Then my first, again, it is no different than my reaction to the other, to the same issues. I don't see that conversation any different than the other ones. I have had students come to me. Look, I don't question my student. If a student comes into my school and they say, my pronouns are not the gender in which I thought they were, I don't even question it. I don't. Having said that, um, on unless somebody tells me differently, I don't hide it from their, like, you know what I mean? Unless I'm worried about their safety and then we need to have that conversation, I also will say that to their parents quite openly.
and well, this is where I would have to say again, getting from biology to preference. If a student, if
But that's them, not me.
from an outside, they could ask you to call them master. I would not expect an adult to cater to the whims of a kid. This would be one of those examples where I say, if a kid comes up to you and
Kids
says,
pick nicknames all the time. Kids
nicknames are
ask
different,
you to call them.
nicknames are
Yeah,
different
but
than
they're different to you. They're different to you because you've decided that the latter is incredibly
biologically is by what
problematic,
no
right?
they're different to me because one is biology versus preference, and
But
nicknames
but your
are
gender presentation is preference.
gender presentation. would be how one presents and
And that
dresses,
preference.
not
Look at
not
me
how.
right now.
I,
Look at me right now. My presentation, right? The way that and then I'm sorry, I would love to talk for like 2 more hours. I don't know how much longer. I'm going to have to get going soon. But the way that I look right now is my preference, right? It's how I choose to look. I don't want, and I know we were talking about my grandma earlier, and when she was asking me like what non-binary means and all of those things. But not too long ago, I walked into a bathroom and somebody grabbed me by the scruff of the neck and tried to pull me out. And I was following my girlfriend in at the time. And I was just like, I was so taken back by it. Now, when I turned around, okay, they very quickly, because I have kind of feminine features. I think when people mistake me, they see baggy jeans, they see a short hair, they maybe see tattoos, and that's it. That's all they've clocked in on. And they've grabbed me, and then they were so apologetic. Number one, don't grab me. But number two, I don't get mad at the perception of me being a guy because the way that I present, the way that I choose to express my whatever, you can call it gender. I
I
could
call
give a
it I call it style, but
There we go. The way that I choose right now falls in a category that people, for the most part, taking a quick glance, would very quickly lump in a guy category, right? And I think the way that we present and the way that we walk through this world and the way that we treat other people and the way we want to be treated still has so much tied up with stereotypes and preconceptions of what those two different genders are. Not my sex, just the way in which I dress. Now, I work at a very different school. You know that. I don't work at a school with 3,000 kids, right? I work at a small school where I know all the parents. So anything the kid's going through, we've already had 17 meetings about it, right? That's probably a big reason they brought them to Metro in the first place because, they want a place where they can have that conversation, smaller class sizes, and all of that kind of stuff. But that's different. I would never, and I've heard this sometimes where like somebody said, oh, teachers got together and they got the kid a doctor and they snuck in meds and all of a sudden they were transitioning and their parents said,
well,
can we at least put that over on the side of Crazy Town,
no, can we
please?
can we at least put that on the side of, okay, that crossed the line? Can we,
Sure.
whether or not they're gendering misgendering, whether or not they are biologically incorrectly identifying the kid, not letting the parents know, that has happened. I don't think we can deny that happened. The only
I,
question,
I've only heard of one case and I'd still like to hear the full story. Now, in Canada, in Ontario, I think we talked about this before. You can be 14 and decide.
oh yeah,
Isn't
well, you
that
can.
right?
There's a few things that you can be for, that the age of consent is surprisingly not surprising. It is
No,
what it
like
is.
14, and you don't need your parent. And I found this out not through law. I found this out from a friend of a friend's kid, and they were 14 years old, and they wanted whatever. They were going to a doctor, and they were talking about being trans, and the dad didn't like it, and the doctor basically said, "Yeah, but in Ontario, your son gets to decide." Now, is it? I don't know much more than that, but I find that interesting. And if the law is respecting it in that capacity, am I not supposed to?
Well, I know. Well, first of all, I would say I'm looking now. The age of consent for sexual activity is 16 in Canada. In some cases, the age of consent is higher. For example, where there's a relationship of trust or authority. 16. I'd say you can talk.
What does that mean?
Oh, I think it means like if there's a teacher relationship, then it has to be a. I'll have to find
If
the
they're
examples.
teaching you, you're not allowed to sleep with your students. I don't
No,
understand.
no, even
That's the law, isn't it?
I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go. I'll find out what those exceptional cases are.
Oh,
I'm actually quite happy that I don't know what they are offhand.
yeah,
Um,
really, really.
no, but so we can agree. See, this is where you agree on the black and white. Okay, so obviously transitioning behind the parents' back crosses the line, criminal. I don't know. Maybe you won't go there. The one.
Well, what my question was, though, my question was this: the 14-year-old can transition behind the parents' back regardless. Is that true?
Let's actually. I don't know what the age of. I don't think it's that. I think it still
Oh,
is 16 because I can't see it being different than tattoos, which are 16 or 18.
tattoos are 18, I think.
So I can't see it. I'll say within the realm of the law, then I have then that is the best. Like I'll talk if it's not
Mhm.
illegal. If this
Yeah.
image is not illegal CP, then the law will be the ultimate defense for what can be discussed. But just like finish the one thing. We can agree. Secret transitioning, bad. Over the line.
Oh, yeah.
A
Teachers,
kid comes in and says,
anybody doing something with this with a minor that isn't their legal right to be doing would be the same thing, and that's true of a hockey coach. That's true of a
well,
teacher.
true,
That's true of
but now we're
a
getting into
pastor.
that goes right back to the first question as to where that legal line between a teacher and a parent
I have a question for
exists.
you.
Yep.
What do pastors? What can they get away with?
Legally, I don't know. And if where we're going with this is confessions, like
Yeah,
if a
I never
minor,
thought about it till right this minute.
I don't, yeah, I wouldn't even know what age limit. I think there must be some religious laws to the age of someone who could even go to the confessional, but I don't know. But let's just say we can agree on the black and white cases. We can agree on the black and white books that are just outright inappropriate. We can agree that on certain things. Then the question only becomes whether or not gender discussion is
The qu-
ever appropriate.
yeah,
Whether
but
or
I
not, oh, sorry, go ahead.
look, gender has, first of all, gender's in the curriculum. So when I talk about, I teach a grade 12 society challenge and change course, gender is in the curriculum. The distinction between sex and gender is in the curriculum. The conversations about the LGBTQ plus movement is in the curriculum. That's in
Yeah,
the
but
politics curriculum.
you might just be this might be evidence as to
Just
how.
Ontario.
No, I know, and some people are going to listen to this and say, well, this is evidence as to how the Canadian educational system has gone the way of the woke and like has gone into total
Yeah,
abortion.
sure.
So
Ridiculous. But I'll stand in firm disbelief of that. I would say a stronger educational system has more ideas on the table, has a more open discourse, has a more open banter. And I'm talking about grade 12 courses. That's what education should have. And if a parent is really concerned, if a parent really wants to argue the opposite or really wants to be involved, they can get involved. But their ideas do not get to control, manipulate, or indoctrinate the
well,
curriculum.
like
They get to
unless it's one
choose
of
the courses they take. That's all.
well, their views don't get to determine the
Control
curriculum
the table. Exactly.
unless it's one of the cut and dry examples that we can all agree on, the most extreme of the extreme examples.
Sure. But listen, I saw a teacher screaming at a student like this far from their face. And people are worried about whether or not I'm respecting pronouns. What do you think causes more damage?
Well, first of all, respecting what do I think causes more damage? I
The
don't know.
screaming?
Well,
Or if a kid comes in and says, I'd like to go by they them.
it doesn't look. I'll even grant you
Just
what I think.
saying, where's the outrage about the screaming
No,
teacher?
but
That all is
I think
me.
there should be, and the fact that two things are destructive, but one more destructive than the other, doesn't mean that the other one's not destructive. I
I'm
think.
simply saying I, as well as you, would like some consistency across the board. I saw a gym teacher rugby tackle a girl because two girls were fighting, and he rugby tackled one of them, and I mean a hard shoulder. And the comments were filled with people that would, let's be honest, not drinking Bud Light, saying, how to go. That's the way you take care of them. Kids nowadays need respect.
I don't read any. The internet comments are generally speaking a cesspool where you don't even know if people are trolling anymore and like reverse double fakey troll.
Yeah,
No,
sure.
but I look. I think any number of things can be destructive for a student, and I do think engaging in and affirming the confusion of children is destructive. Whether or not it's more or less than
You
destructive
think
than
it's
other stuff.
destructive if parents support it as well.
Well, say that again.
You think it's destructive if parents support it as well.
Yes, I do.
Yeah. So
And
that's where we can sit here and talk about should a teacher go behind a parent's back and what is the danger zone and what is the precedent. But our fundamental disagreement, to be honest, on this particular issue is going to come when you say you don't believe that gender affirming care is what we should be engaging in. And I say I'm going to believe the endocrinologist, the child psychologist, the trans community. And then we just sit here at an
yeah, no,
impasse.
for sure. And
Right?
then the only
That's
question
the
is,
bottom line of that conversation.
yeah, and then we revisit in 30 to 50 years and see where things have gone and whether or not
All win.
I'm sure back in the day they were saying, and not to use a hyperbolic analogy, but I'm sure back in the day they were saying lobotomy is the cutting edge technology to getting rid of certain mental illnesses. It'll be great. And
You know that they still use lobotomies now
well, I mean,
for for very specific things. I'm just
I
saying
know, and I have.
it hasn't
I
gone
just
away.
I just had on my channel. Hold on, I'm absolutely going senile. Um, oh, I'm ashamed of myself. The oh my goodness, Blair White. My goodness, I'm thinking of too many names. I just had Blair White on, where Blair White is one of those examples of someone who you would refer to Blair as a she, and no one would have a second guess. No one would think that they're violating their own psychological understanding of biology.
Sure.
And Blair might be one
They
of the.
passed
Sorry.
because they
Well,
passed,
I don't think
right?
she. I don't think she. It's an interesting thing. I knew Blair on Twitter before I knew that she was trans. So like in
Mhm.
my mind, that was the factual reality that I ever had. You could tell me one day that you're biologically different than I think that you are, and
Sure.
then I'd still be surprised, and I'd still reflexively say she to you. Um, but Blair might be one of the examples, and I think is one of the rare examples where recognizing, as Blair does, that it's gender dysphoria, a mental condition, and only under the rarest of circumstances does it go to where it went, and even then it didn't go all the way to removing the body parts. That might be one of the anomalous examples of where the radical treatment is necessary to
Hmm.
eliminate the psychological distress. But anybody who pretends that this is not becoming something of a goth type, what's the word with the ones who were dressed in like black and they were always sad? It was
God,
goth. Okay.
they were always sad.
Sorry, that's
God,
what an
yeah.
old man would. Anyone pretending that there's not something of a trending thing going on right now, and the
Look,
more destructive
here's
thing is.
what I would say. I don't think there's a trending thing of people wanting to have major surgery and life altering hormones. I think that's all taken very, very, very heavy. And I would disagree with anybody who says otherwise, by the person, by the parent, by the medical community. Here's what I do think is a big trend, and in my opinion, a good one. I think a gender binary is a useless traditional set of circumstances and expectations and boxes we put upon people that only limits humanity. And I mean that probably in a bigger way for men than I do for women. Because as a woman, I have been allowed socially to sort of have a much wider scope of how I want to present, what I want to engage in, how I interact with people, what I do without the fear of violence or significant recourse. Men, on the other hand, do not have that. Men step out of the box in which they are presubscribed, and they face a level of um, harassment and violence and bigotry um, that is disgusting, that is shameful, and that only serves to limit who people can grow to be. And I think that is an amazing conversation that people don't want to have because they're too worried about whether or not their 6 year old wants to wear a dress or not. But this is an amazing conversation.
No,
And if
well,
we're right, people have genetic predispositions to do a whole bunch of things. I just don't think they're as connected to our gender presentation and our gender or our social roles as we have tried to, and I say that word because it hasn't been successful and it's changed over the decades, right? That we have tried to instill upon everybody else.
it is an interesting discussion. I don't think many people are averse to that discussion. And when it comes to gender as a concept versus sex, I don't think people
Yeah.
might disagree. I think that where the disagreement hits the fan and pollutes the broader discussion is when it starts involving kids, gender affirming care, which is a euphemism for something that I much
The
worse.
kids. Yeah. But
And
the kids are the ones that haven't bought into gender roles yet.
look, I don't think the kids are having thoughts that are. I don't think the trend among the kids is an organic trend among kids who are discovering freedom. I think it's actually pervasive indoctrination from adults who are putting
You
on
know
the kids
little
their.
look, you know little girls that have always wanted to wear their brother's clothes, and you
And
know
no, but
little
no
boys
one
who
ever said.
always wanted to put on the dress. And you know both of those circumstances, we have socially culled their inclination to a certain point, the girls a lot less than the boys, and then sent them on their way, right?
I
That's what I'm talking about. That's all I'm talking about.
Well, yeah, and I think
Let's
now
start
we've.
there.
But now we might have gone to the full swing opposite, where back in the day, oh, some people say don't wear a dress and do whatever and be whatever. I think now we've gotten to the exact opposite, which is where this trend comes from the adults to the kids and not vice versa. Where I like to say as a parent, when a parent says to a kid, don't be afraid, they're actually, planting that seed for the kid to be afraid.
Mm,
And so
that's a yeah.
when you see kids saying, I want to dress, and then the parent thinks, oh, I'm going to be so supportive and affirming, I'm going to make a bigger deal of it than should otherwise be made of it, such that when the
Sure.
kid hits 10 years old, I think I'm a they, or I want to be
Yeah, but now you're saying, parents aren't perfect and they're not perfectly raising their kids, but I think that erring on the side of, as long as it doesn't hurt other
exactly.
people or
Well,
hurt them,
as long as
erring on the side of, I'm going to support you 100%, I don't think you go wrong as a parent or
it
as
doesn't hurt you, and gender affirming care hurts them.
But that's not what we're talking
No,
about. We
but
were simply talking, does your 6-year-old little boy want to wear the dress to school every day? And are you culling that behavior? We have forever and ever and ever. I had a kid, listen, I taught a kid a very, very long time ago. And, the amount of therapy that was foisted upon him because, he liked female pop stars was a lot.
yeah, I
And
think
that's the trend.
no, but and I think
If you want to talk about indoctrination, let's talk about it on both sides equally. And I promise you, the side that says boys will wear blue and play with trucks is a much bigger proponent of what that indoctrination looks like than the opposite. Still,
I think we can agree on what we agree on, so long as it doesn't harm the kid. And then
I agree.
the question becomes, when
Where
does it?
does it? Side note, and then we're gonna have to wrap up.
Yes,
I
are
love
we?
your Why don't I have a cool emblem like that? Because I feel like that's more my hair than yours.
You would not want to wear this emblem in in certain.
You know
You
what
might
it
get in
reminds me a
trouble.
little bit of? It reminds me of Beaker. You remember Beaker from the
Oh, hold on,
Muppets?
I'm getting a. I might hold on a second. I might have to run now because I'm getting a
That's
call.
okay. We can run
Okay,
because we're wrapping it up right now.
okay,
Thank you so much for hanging out. I really
Joe.
appreciate you.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for the discussion. Look, like I say, I believe you are a sincerely well-intentioned individual and not a malicious player and not a deceitful player. And then I think
And
we
that's why I love
understand.
these conversations with you,
Good,
right? I appreciate you. Stick around for 1 second. I just have one
absolutely.
thing off camera that I want to say to you, to everybody that's listening. Thank you so much for listening. I will leave all of his connections and links in the comment section below, and I will see you next Tuesday. Same bat time, same bat station. Dismissed.